All right, hey, ladies and gentlemen, what's up? Hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to another episode of, I guess we're calling it Paranormal Pete. I am your host, Peter Simeti. I'm the publisher and founder of Alterna Comics and also the creator of King Cryptid, which is a comic book series currently on Indiegogo right now, which will be out in 2023. Thank you guys for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the Bridgewater Triangle today, and also the HOCKOMOCK Swamp, which is located inside of the Bridgewater Triangle. We have a very special guest today as well, which is a resident of Bridgewater, Massachusetts, and probably somebody who might be familiar to those of you in the chat. You guys have seen him in the chat before, but I want to say hello to you guys before we get started here. Seer of all that is obvious. Hey, how are you doing? Hope you're doing good. We got Reverend Saber here as well, Allison McGlone, and also I'm not Wagenstein. Forgive me for the pronunciation, but thank you for joining us today. All right, so without further ado, let's bring on our very extra special guest. That is one Mr. Pete Engstrom.
Good afternoon. How you doing, Pete? How you doing, chat? Nice to be here.
Doing very good. I hope you're doing good. Are you doing okay?
I'm doing great. You know, it's a beautiful day. The family's out and about. And I've got the whole place to myself, free to stream in peace and quiet, hopefully.
All
Talk
right.
some
Yeah, we're
Bridgewater
going to
Triangle.
hopefully have you here for about an hour or so. So let me get a little backstory on you. Have you lived in Bridgewater your whole life?
Pretty much, yes. I have lived in Bridgewater since I was 8. So that's pretty much my whole life, yeah. So, yeah, and it's been one of these places where, you know, I don't know if anybody else really knows much about the Bridgewater Triangle. And it seems kind of like one of these places where once you, every so often you'll meet somebody, oh, you live in Bridgewater or you in the Bridgewater area, and somebody will bring it up. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, you've heard about it, you know about it, and it's pretty cool when it happens.
So as far as the Bridgewater Triangle goes, could you give us a little bit of detail about that? Is that similar to like the Bermuda Triangle, or is it just because of the triangular location?
So what the Bridgewater Triangle is it's roughly it's a 200 square mile triangle. It was noted in the book. There's this cryptozoologist by the name of Loren Coleman. And in the early 80s, he wrote a book called Mysterious America. And he talked about this region that he named the Bridgewater Triangle because of all this weird stuff that would happen there. And it's just think of like, did you ever watch Unsolved Mysteries back in the day? Like old Robert
absolutely,
Stack?
Yeah.
When you think of the Bridgewater Triangle, think of like the greatest hits of Unsolved Mysteries. It's like, you know, UFOs, check. Bigfoot, check. Ghosts, check. Missing persons, check. Murders, check.
Secret society type activities.
Yeah, cult activity. All that stuff that would be featured on Unsolved Mysteries. This place has it, and it's really cool. So it's basically the northern point is in the town of Abington. Let me think. The southeast is in Freetown, and the southwest is in Rehoboth.
Yeah, let me see. I think, will it still play us if I... Let me see. I'll take us out for just 1 second because I got that map right behind us so people could see. So there it is.
There it is. Yep. So basically, that area in southeastern Massachusetts has been kind of a hotbed of really weird, bizarre, unexplained stuff, and you know, also like, you know, Native American curses, which I'll kind of get into in a little bit, which is part of it too. But the long and the short of it is, it's a really neat place if you're into that sort of stuff, and you know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the thing is too is that it does have this really kind of murky origin in terms of where people think that this all stems from in terms of these dark energies. And like you touched upon, it does have to do with a lot of these Native American curses stemming from what I researched anyway, from King Philip's War.
That's right.
what was done at that point in time to him and to his people.
Mm, exactly. For those of you that don't know anything about King Philip's War, it was sort of like in the 1670s. There was this one of the Wampanoag sachems by the name of Metacomet. They called him King Philip, and so he led an uprising against the English settlers. And for about like a year, it was just like thousands of people were killed, both Indians, both settlers. It was just bloody. And so before he died, King Philip died. He was captured and killed. But before he died, he gave something called the wampum belt to one of his war chiefs, by a guy by the name of Anawan. And so he gave him this sacred belt that held all the history of the Wampanoag people. And basically, when he surrendered at a place called Anawan Rock in Rehoboth, which is apparently super haunted. People see ghosts of Anawan himself. People hear like drumming from natives. They hear people speaking in Indian dialect. All
Like a
sorts
lot
of
of
weird
that
stuff
residual
happens.
energy and things like that.
Yeah. And so people believe that when the wampum belt was taken, it just vanished. No one knows what happened to it. And both Anawan and Metacomet, they were both beheaded, and their heads were stuck on pikes at Fort Plymouth. So for 20 years, that's pretty brutal.
Yeah, and especially what had occurred too, leading up to all of that, is that the settlers did really get along. There was a really nice, from all accounts, they got along. They helped each other out, and then slowly but surely over time, various treaties were broken. Various different leaders within the tribe, and also through the side of the settlers, through various British. Of course, this is all British-owned colonies at this point in time. This wasn't necessarily America established. They had different leaders that would betray these treaties, and they did this eventually, even to the capacity of once they captured King Philip. They weren't supposed to kill all of his people. He surrendered so that it would spare the lives of his people, and then they betrayed him on that as well, and then executed him and drawn quartered and beheaded and all that stuff, and then, like you said, make a display out of it. And it was it's all the stuff that would lead to just overall bad, dark energy in the term of the trauma inflicted upon the land. But if there's anything spiritual or mystical about any of this, I think it really does play a part later down for generations to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people feel as if all the bad juju that goes on around here is directly responsible. That the whole King Philip's War was directly responsible. It was just kind of like, and the other thing too is the HOCKOMOCK swamp was, for those of you who don't know, the HOCKOMOCK swamp is this giant wetlands that takes up a handful of towns in, I think it's West Bridgewater, East Bridgewater, I think part of Whitman. And basically this area was sacred for the Wampanoags. And it was, I mean, they'd been there for thousands of years. There's like thousands of graves out there, not mass burials, but over the centuries, they would bury their people out there. And they found stuff that dated back like 7,000 or 8,000 years. I mean, it's just...
Oh, yeah, it's very, very old.
Very old. And the HOCKOMOCK, I guess, in Algonquin means place where spirits dwell, which is another one of these things where they're like, ooh, spooky spirits. But I mean, when you think about it, I mean, if they bury their dead there, you would think that that's the place where spirits dwell. But that place, that's what people feel is the epicenter of all the Bridgewater Triangle itself. I mean, of all the things that people see, a lot of people see stuff at the HOCKOMOCK swamp. So, but
bodies of water as well. A lot of energy and just bodies of water in general are very, very well known for just their properties of containing, absorbing, and then redistributing energies, and just even scientifically. It's the same thing with so many different kinds of energies that we know and establish. That's what's always so funny to me about the paranormal, is that to me it's just one different version of energy that is still not being acknowledged. And it just seems like, well, why not? Because all these other things that we can't see that are energies have been acknowledged, and this is why they occur, and all these other kind of levels. And then meanwhile, we have a lot of paranormal type energies that you can usually read with an EMF detector, that's for electromagnetic frequency, on all these other kind of things that register true to science energies. But all these fluctuations that occur, they're dismissed. This is just, oh, these are outliers, or, oh, this is just kind of, a weird reading for today, or whatever it might have been. But it's like, no, this is most likely an explanation for these things. So it's kind of interesting to me because of the fact that it does have at the heart of it this swamp that has been a long, long time sacred body of water to these people that lived here for such a long time, and were eventually betrayed and then kind of almost eradicated from the area.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's funny that you were talking about like bad deals, with between the natives and the settlers. There's one place in East Bridgewater called Sachem Rock, and Sachem Rock is kind of historically known as the site of the first ever land purchase, like recorded land purchase in America, and it was between the Sachem, Massasoit, and Miles Standish. And so it was basically the settlers bought like what would be East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, Bridgewater, and I think part of Whitman and Brockton for basically like, a couple of knives, some, skins, moose skins, and a couple of pouches of nonsense. I mean, they got hosed. You're talking about,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of, a lot of lands like that are infamous for these land deals that kind of screwed the natives.
Sure.
In that kind of respect, to them this stuff was valuable, but in terms of transitioning to like the new world, essentially, this was going to have little to no value, and would put them very greatly behind. So it's that kind of a thing. It's very interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, the other thing about the Bridgewater Triangle is that, not only is it like people believe that it's cursed, but the other cool thing about it is all the cryptid stuff that people find and report out there. I don't know. Were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
I was just agreeing. I've heard of that stuff too, between the sights and the sounds. Yeah. Have you seen anything? Have you heard anything?
So no, all the build up and
you're lucky.
Well, I'll tell you. Okay, so I have two ghost stories that I can share, but I don't know if they're anything related to.
Well, I absolutely, share whatever it may be, because you're in the area. I'm sure that you and a lot of other residents of the area too probably have a ton of stories and oddities that have occurred in their lives.
Well, there's a few places, like there's a house that's literally down the street from me, right down the street, and people have sworn up and down that it's haunted. And there was a doctor that lived in, he had his practice out of the house, and that's where I went as a kid and throughout my teens is to his office, and his family were like, oh yeah, this place is haunted. And then there was another former neighbor that moved into that house later on, and she swore up and down she saw things move, she heard things, she saw things. She's like, yeah, that place is spook central. Now personally, me, I've only experienced of all the spooky things I've ever seen, the only two things have happened. One was at my house, and I'll tell you that story. I've never really told the story to too many people, but I'll share it with you.
Should we lower the lights and distort your voice?
Yes. On a dark and stormy night. So when I was a kid, my grandfather used to raise German Shepherds, and his last German Shepherd, her name was Ruthie, and she was about 13, 14 years old, and we had to put her down. And so she had, we used to keep her in the kitchen, and she'd walk along at night on the linoleum floor. And I don't know if anybody has dogs that have like claws. It makes a very distinct sound when you hear an animal walking around, a dog on the floor. So for maybe 3 to 6 months after we put the dog down, we could hear, or I could hear, the dog walking around and pacing and making her rounds in the kitchen. And I kept it to myself. I didn't say a word to anybody. And then until finally one day I mentioned it to my mother. And I said, I think I hear Ruthie walking around at night. You're going to think I'm crazy. She's like, you know what? I've heard her too. And, I kind of thought about it, like, 'cause she's still kind of protecting us. She was, and that's 6 months. And then after that, it was gone. I never heard a thing. And the rest of the house has been fine. I never had any issues. But that was something that I can't explain. I have no idea why that happened. But, I live in the triangle, so maybe it has something to do with that. The second story, now forgive me, this is about 25 years ago, and I don't remember. I remember the name of the guy who owned the house. His name was Bill. And I think it was in Stoughton, which is right outside of where the Triangles allegedly has all the bad juju, but it's in the vicinity. So it was in the summertime, and we were visiting this guy's house, and I'd only been there once. That was 25 years ago, so I don't remember every detail, but I remember this, and I'll never forget it. He was having some sort of like a cookout, and it was middle of summer. I go grab a can of Coke, sit down in what was this kind of like a den type of room. The kitchen was in front of me. So there was a door to the kitchen. There was a door leading outside to like this breezeway. And then there was another door to my left that was like a study. Like it had all these books and like a computer. It was just like this one kind of room, and it didn't even have any windows in it. So I'm at Bill's house, and people were saying, I had heard that the place was haunted. The place had a woman had passed away there somewhere on the property, and she had haunted the place ever since. And so the people that had owned the place said that they saw a ghost. Bill himself said he saw a full-bodied apparition, the whole nine. And so I'm sitting there in the den, the little den. I'm drinking my can of Coke, and all three doors, the one in front of me, the one on my right, and the one on my left, all shut at the exact same time. Just
wow.
Clunk. And I'm like, that was weird. And I kind of got up, and I'm like, there's no breeze. It's not, even though I mentioned like one of them was off to like a breezeway, there was no wind that could have blown all three doors shut at the same time, especially the one room that didn't have any windows in it, and it was wide open, and there was against that door was just a wall. So I mean, what caused those doors to all, like, they were completely wide open, just all shut at the same time? So I go outside, and I got my can of Coke, and I'm kind of like, I'm pale at this point because he knows, and he's like, "What's up?" And I said, I was just sitting in that room, and all three doors shut at the same time. And he looked at me, smiled. He goes, "Yeah, she does that sometimes." And I was like, I got goosebumps right now thinking about it, because I was like, it freaked me out. So that was the only two things. I wish I had something cooler to tell you, like I saw, a ghost. I saw a Bigfoot out in the woods. Nah, those are my only two stories, but they happen in and around the triangle. So maybe I can just chalk that up to the
That's
spookiness.
interesting. I always wonder with ghosts, maybe it's just because they're trying to do something that does get the attention of people, and that's kind of the easiest way to do it. But they always seem to go towards doors or any kind of thing that they can open, shut, that kind of a thing, as opposed to any other, like maybe interacting physically with somebody, even though there have been accounts of that kind of thing. But it's always interesting to me that it's these kinds of this kind of paranormal activity where the doors close on things, and I'm thinking, is that something that they're doing because the ghost wants it that way, or are they trying to get your attention, or what could that possibly be? That's very has anything like that ever happened to you in your own home, where just doors just close on their own or open on their own?
No, nothing in my house. Every so often. It's an old house. Things will kind of creak, and you get the typical noises that old houses have, but nothing like really straight. Like, I don't hear like footsteps or doors opening and shutting or anything like that. And nothing that can't be explained by, like, just the vacuum of like air pressure, kind of like, you open a door in one room and the other door shuts, just
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we've all had that happen. But I mean, nothing outside of that. But I mean, I'm grateful for that, because I don't want to live in a haunted house. I mean, it sounds cool in theory, but I don't
I'm
know.
sure. I'm sure everyone watching right now is checking on both of our backgrounds to make sure things don't start moving.
Yeah, well, we're in the middle of the day, so hopefully that'll help with it screws with the ambiance of the atmosphere of the telling spooky stories in the middle of the day. But you know,
But so aside from your own experiences of those two things, have you heard experiences from anybody else in the area about stuff that they've had, whether maybe they have seen something like a creature or a UFO, or heard noises, or anything else similar to what you experienced with like the ghosts kind of stuff with the doors?
outside of my one neighbor that swore that house down the street was haunted, really, no. I mean, I wish I had spoken to somebody that said, "Oh, you know what? I saw lights in the sky and I can't explain it," or I, was on Lake Nippanicket in Bridgewater and I saw phantom fires or something. Which is something that's been reported. I Most of the stuff that whenever I talk to people about the Bridgewater Triangle is just kind of usually the same stories that we've all heard. Like, oh, I somebody had seen this at one point in time. But to answer your question, no, I haven't spoken to anybody yet that has actually experienced anything that kind of falls in the realm of creepy Bridgewater Triangle stuff.
Have you been in the HOCKOMOCK swamp?
Uh, Once, and it sounds kind of lame because it's right there. It's literally like I'm right on top of it. I went there once. I've been driven by it like a trillion times, but I went in there once, and I was there for about an hour, and it started raining. I'm like, ugh, got to get out of this, and we went back and went home, and I never went back. It's, again, it's kind of a dud of a question, but or of an answer rather. But to answer your question, no. I have been to out by Freetown State Forest, and that was one place that is part of the Bridgewater Triangle. And you talk about creepy, evil stuff happening. There is some really bad stuff out there, and I can't, you know, I can't describe in words how messed up that place has. Just the
A lot
stories that
of
come out.
so not necessarily paranormal, but things
Bo-
that have occurred, like a cult, that kind of a stuff.
both,
Oh,
both.
both. Wow.
Yeah, people have seen like shadows in the woods. People have seen puckwudgies out in the Freetown State Forest. But there's a lot of like cult activity, like satanic cults back in like the 70s and 80s, 70s through the 90s, really. There were like these satanic cults that would go out there and have rituals, and they would, kill animals and sacrifices. And there were these weird, like, structures that were out in the woods that people would find, like hunters would find. Like, there was like this shack out in the middle of the woods with all this weird stuff that, obviously, authorities went out there. I'll tell you a story. Um, I did talk to somebody at one point in time about um, the Freetown State Forest. There was a documentary film that came out about the Bridgewater Triangle that I went to a screening of the next town over. And in the documentary, there's this guy by the name of Alan Alves. He was a detective in Freetown. And after the film was over, the director was like, "Oh, hey, by the way, we have a special guest in attendance tonight, Detective Alan Alves. He's retired Freetown cop. Feel free to come over and ask." Nobody did. Nobody went up and bothered him, but I did, because I wanted to talk to him about it. It's, you've seen some stuff. And when I saw his face, when I looked in his eyes, he had seen some stuff. You ever meet people that, like, you can tell they've seen some real ish in their life, like
Yeah,
horrible
yeah.
stuff. That was the look I got from this guy. He was wicked nice. He was super nice. He answered all my questions. He was
There's a
super cool.
world weariness.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Like, he investigated murders. He had investigated like gruesome ones too. Not even just like, oh, the guy was shot and left out in the woods, like beheaded people and just weird. Ugh. And then he'd also grave robbings. That was another one that I remember hearing back in the 90s. There was a lot of grave robbing going around, and they would use the body parts for like satanic rituals and weird stuff. And so he had to go in there and figure out what's what. And you can only imagine the kind of stuff and people he had to deal with, and just but he told me flat out, he's like, yeah, Freetown State Forest is evil. Like, that place is just bad. He didn't like that place at all, and he had to go out there for a whole number of reasons. And just you could see it on his face, you know what I mean? It's just, you could tell that that everything that he had experienced out there had stayed with him, and he wouldn't shake it. It's pretty telling how messed up that place is. And I actually, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, are you aware of any kind of ancient history with that forest? Is there any kind of story to that, like there is similar to like the HOCKOMOCK Swamp and other areas in Bridgewater?
Well, yeah, there's a few. I mean, there's I think it was Profile Rock. Not
Oh yeah,
Profile.
yeah.
Could it be Profile
I think
Rock?
there is, yeah.
I can't, now I'm drawing a blank, but I guess in Assonet there's which is part of the Freetown State Forest. There's a rock that, where if you stand at it and look at it at a certain point, it's kind of like Profile Rock, or the Man of the Mountain.
Yeah, the old
in
Man
New
of the
Hampshire.
Mountain, yeah.
Yeah, it's a profile rock. If you look at it certain position, you can see the face of an Indian on it. And so the Wampanoags felt that was like sacred to them. That was a sacred area. And there was also a sonnet ledge where there's the people see things and ghosts and weird stuff happening on there. And Puckwudgies, I know you're eventually going to put Puckwudgies into King Cryptid.
Yep.
But Puckwudgies are a big time attraction to the Freetown State Forest. And if you don't know what a Puckwudgie is, everybody, a Puckwudgie is a Wampanoag legend of, they're like these little, I guess you would call them trolls, and they're mischievous and they're evil, and they play tricks on people, and usually deadly. People think that the Assonet Ledge,
yeah, in the legend too, they used to actually get along pretty well with humankind until they were betrayed. So it's funny how that works out. There's a lot of betrayal in the area.
There sure is. But what they would, one of the things is, like, they would trick people into going into the woods. They would control these thing called Taipai-Wonkas, which are like these little balls of light. You know what I mean? And apparently what they supposedly were was the souls of the Indians that they had killed, and they could control them. And so, like, you'd be walking through the woods and you'd see a light, and then you'd follow it, and it was the Puckwudgies tricking you. And they would trick you, they would kind of lead you to your doom. So a lot of people think the Sonnet Ledge, like, people that have jumped off with no prior history of depression or anything like that, like, oh, maybe the Puckwudgies tricked them into getting close to the ledge and then push them off. That was one of the stories that I've heard over the years. But yeah, Puckwudgies are cool. Just even the name Puckwudgie, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, the people have, and I guess there's even, I've never seen it, but I've seen pictures of it, that the rangers at the Freetown Forest have Puckwudgie crossing signs, kind of like Moose Crossing or whatever, but they have Puckwudgie crossing signs, which is cute. Just be careful of these
until you see one.
Right, these little
and then it's not cute anymore.
Not anymore. But people swear that they've seen him even to this day. That's I don't know. too many reports that I can pull off the top of my head on this year and this time, but like I've heard stories that people claim that they've either seen them or have been tricked in some way into, like, one story I heard. There was somebody that was walking along like one of the trails, and they had seen one, and they went like maybe 10-15 feet into the woods, and then they turned around and the path was gone. They were lost and they didn't know where they were. So it's like, this is kind of like the dark magic, the evil stuff that the Pukwudgies do. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but you always hear fun stories about them, and so just Pukwudgies are cool. So yeah, the Freetown Forest, outside of just being a magnet for just bad, evil stuff, but there's also, Native American history behind that, particularly with the Pukwudgies.
Now, correct me if I'm misremembering, but touching upon something real that happened, wasn't Freetown the place where the Boston Marathon bombers, where there was a shootout in Freetown, and that's when they eventually had got them, and one of them was killed?
I think that was Watertown.
Was that Watertown? Okay.
Yeah, because
All
that's
right.
closer to Boston than Freetown is it's.
I think I might be thinking of something else that I heard that happened in Freetown, but I could be misremembering.
Yeah, it could be.
But okay, so Watertown.
Yeah, I think the marathon bomber was he was hiding in a boat in Watertown, kid. I remember they were like, they caught him in Watertown.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what everybody was talking
Watertown.
about it. Because just because people around here always leave out the R's. It was like, they caught him in Watertown. So yeah, it was they caught him in Watertown.
Okay.
So yeah, caught him in a boat.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of stuff. We had AL ask and said what was up with all the New England weirdness. I think that has a lot to do just in general with all the natives and a lot of other stuff in the area, and just the land itself being so old and having so much history to it outside of the history we even could possibly know about. There's so much history just in America in itself. For thousands upon thousands of years, there's still stuff that we don't know, and still stuff being unearthed. And some of it you have to imagine as well is kind of not being fully disclosed to people, depending upon what they do find, because it turns into having to rewrite history books based on how old certain civilizations are or how long they've been around. So there's always stuff being found, but what I think is so interesting about a lot of this stuff is in modern day, we start to associate science, I think, with more like the dulling of phenomena. So it turns into this very mundane. It's a simple explanation for all these complex paranormal things. But when you think about in terms of people still talking among each other, and I think the explosion of the internet and social media has caused people to talk among each other a whole lot, way more than ever before. You start connecting with people all over the place. That there's all these kinds of stories, there's all these kinds of histories, all these cultures have very similar, not just legends and folklore, but they also have similar ways of going about certain rituals that kind of keep the bad spirits away, or induce like good karma upon you. And then even architecturally, a lot of them are very similar with certain things that you wonder, well, how could they have established that when they had no way of communicating? And now we have ways of communicating like crazy, almost too much in some way. So it's strange to see that in the day and age of the explosive communication that we have everywhere, and every one of us kind of can talk among ourselves, even right now, having this conversation, having people watch it here or watch it later. You don't really get a lot of this stuff being really researched or talked about or whatever it is, at least on the surface level. Who knows what's going on beneath all of that, because there's trillions of dollars that go unaccounted for year after year, for a very long time now, in terms of what is researched and what is looked into. And who knows what the hell they're actually, in terms of the government or scientists or whatever it may be, in terms of what they're researching and what they're finding out and what they choose to disclose or not disclose. Half the time it feels like disclosure is made in such a mundane way that you're supposed to just meet it with like a shrug,
Mm.
or it's stuff that you're like, yeah, we kind of already known about that for a while. Thanks for admitting it.
Right.
Like we're seeing right now with the current UFO and UAP phenomenons. But it feels like one day we're going to start getting something where these kinds of spirits and energies and stories of monsters and cryptids and all that kind of stuff, there's going to start to become some kind of official disclosure on it, because people go, well, why don't they have carcasses? Why don't they have all this proof? Well, but they only have what we're told that they have. So it's
Right.
that kind of a thing as well, where if they do find these kinds of things, because those discoveries lead to other doors being open, it turns into how many doors do you want to start opening? So if you have any kind of system of control here and power, it turns into, well, let's keep a couple of these doors closed.
Mm.
So it really is interesting, though, because I think many people out there can go into a certain area and just not get a good vibe from the area. The energy feels weird. They feel like, this isn't a good place.
Mm.
And how would you explain that? And more often than not, there's a reason for why they feel that way, and they don't even know it.
Mm.
Just going back to a personal experience that Aaron and I had, we were apartment hunting in Salem, Massachusetts at one point, and there's this one building that was a pretty good rent price, and I was like, we should go check it out. And Aaron was like, I don't like the feeling of that building. And I was like,
Mm.
yeah, the rent's pretty good, though. We should check it out. She's just looking at it, just passing it. She just didn't like it at all. We found out it was one of the buildings that the Boston Strangler had killed someone in.
Whoa, no kidding.
Yeah, and we didn't find that out because
Wow.
later on she looked it up that night. And she's always I think she has some kind of empathic abilities, to be honest. But she'll sense energies in all kinds of places. And that was something that she looked it up later on that night to be like, what was wrong with that building? She was getting flashes in her mind of different things, like having trouble breathing, that kind of stuff. And she was
Wow.
telling me about it when we passed it. And then I didn't even think about it. I gave it no thought. But she had looked it up later, and she found it was one of the victims of the Boston Strangler had died in that building.
Jesus. Wow.
So yeah, there's all kinds of different stuff like that. Thinking about in my own area now, I'm not in the Bridgewater area. I'm up in New Hampshire. But
Hmm.
when we had first moved to this area, in this apartment, maybe like a week or two after we moved, it was very, very strange. Now we're kind of close to like a railroad. Not in terms of like a big kind of area over here, but maybe about 2 miles away, there's tracks. So you'll hear, a train every now and then. But this was not a train. This was not a train at all. This was a really weird sound. About 2 a.m, a big woof, 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 like that kind of a sound. And it shook the whole damn building.
Whoa.
We've had trains pass here, and none of that. You hear like the usual like woo, and then like chug 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 woo woo. You hear that. This was not that at all. This was a woo woo, like it felt like it was right over on top of us, shook the whole damn thing, and then it just stopped. Like Aaron and I both woke up and we were like, "What the hell was that?" And then, of course, later on, we eventually find out there was like UFOs in Exeter. There was all kinds of UFOs and everything else around the area. It was very strange. It was one of the loudest things I'd ever heard, and it trembled and woke us up out of our sleep. So that was kind of crazy to just experience that. But there's all kinds of stuff in the New England area.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is it like the people above you had like too many clothes in the washing machine? It was like,
Well, we're on the top. Yeah,
oh
we're
yeah,
on the third floor.
and it was
So
above
yeah,
you guys. Wow,
it
that's
was
even
above.
crazy.
Yeah,
Wow.
it really was. And because I almost got up, but by the time I was going to get up and get out of the bed to look out the window, the sound just stopped completely. It didn't dissipate the way like a train usually in the distance will dissipate. Trains, we hear them all the time. They never ever shake the apartment. They never make
Yeah.
that kind of like weird, hovering, loud sound. It was very strange. So, and it's always hard to tell, is it a UFO that's an extraterrestrial UFO, or is it a UFO that's kind of a stagecraft made, because we've discovered things throughout the years and have now tried to emulate, because there's also Pease military air force air base that's in Portsmouth. So that's relatively kind of close. We see military planes all the time, and big, choppers and stuff that'll kind of make a lot of noise. But
The
yeah,
black helicopters that fly
Yep.
real low. Yeah. Yeah, we get those around here too. In fact, I saw one. I was driving around with my son, and there was one of those black helicopters. It was flying real low, and then it hovered. It just stopped, and like we were driving down on Route 18, and my son was like looking out the window. He's like, "Daddy, what's going on?" I'm like, "I have no idea." And we pulled over, and we were just kind of hovering there for about a minute and a half, and then it just took off. So like, and it was a big, like, like one of those, Black Hawk helicopters, but it was all black, no markings on it, just hovered there for a minute and then took off. Couldn't explain it, but a lot of things you can't explain around here. That's kind of the fun aspect of it.
Yeah, and again, like going a bit outside of Bridgewater, and I've mentioned this before, but about what had occurred in Lincoln, New Hampshire, September 19th, 1961, was the first recorded American UFO abduction. And I say American because there's been other places and other things that have been written in history, but no one, I think, acknowledges whether or not it was a UFO abduction. But the Betty and Barney Hill. And the thing is, I was thinking about that the other day, and I'm going to incorporate that event eventually into King Cryptid stories. But it made me start thinking, could that have possibly been because they were a mixed race couple? He was black, she was white, and they were both involved with civil rights at that point in time. And it makes me think, what better way to discredit those kinds of people than to make them seem like they're stark raving mad and they were abducted by aliens? And considering that took place about maybe 14, 15 years after Roswell, if you have certain abilities to recreate, even as primitively as possible, to recreate a UFO, and you were to do these certain staged abductions to these people that then go on to say these crazy type of things, you could sway and put impressions upon people that make them think like, we shouldn't listen to them about anything. So it really is. It makes me start thinking how deep are there extraterrestrial abductions, or is it being set up by government or whatever kind of layer of the government? I don't know. We'll never really truly know, I think, because they're not just going to come out and say that kind of a thing if there is that. But it makes me think, at least in a creative way, that I wonder if any of that could possibly have been there. But yeah, even going back to AL talking about New England, the first photograph of a UFO was Mount Washington. It was like I forget, but it was really early. Like maybe actually 1800s, something around there. Late 1800s, early 1900s, around there. And you can see there's actually some structure to the thing that's in front of the top of the mountain. And it's unexplainable.
You know what? I don't think I knew that. I'm gonna have to look this up. I'm gonna have to try and find that photo. You said it was Mount Washington?
Yeah, look up like Mount Washington UFO.
I'm gonna do that as soon as we log off. I'm gonna go check that out.
It's like an old timey, like tourist looking photo thing. Like they would sell it of the mountain, and I don't think they realized what they had in the image. And you can see that it has moved at some point. You can see it's two rapid fire in succession kind of pictures. But you can see that the UFO had moved a little bit. And you can see that the way the light hits it, that there's structure to this little thing in front of the mountain. It's very strange.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. I can't wait. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of things. It's really interesting. But the biggest reason I'm having Pete on today to talk about the Bridgewater Triangle and talk about HOCKOMOCK Swamp and places like that as well is because King Cryptid issue number 4 takes place at the HOCKOMOCK Swamp. And it's very strange how that came about, because I had created the character of Broog the Swamp Monster long before I had created the issue and then what was going to happen. And I knew that he was going to be composed of dead and decaying things. And that was kind of the origin of Broog. He wasn't going to be like an industrial waste scenario or anything like that. He was going to mostly be fueled by the spirit energy of these dark and dead things. And I figured, let me see if there's any swamps in the area of New England where King Cryptid is kind of a New England-based character. He's up in the White Mountains. And see if we can put a place for this character to be in. And then I look up HOCKOMOCK Swamp immediately. That's the first thing that pops up. And then I find out the history of HOCKOMOCK. I find out the swamp, literally, the wording even means place where spirits dwell. So it's very strange to me, again, to kind of reverse come up with the character, which basically means like this kind of a place, and then create the issue. So it was interesting to me because it's one of those things where I'm always thinking, okay, you come up with stories, you come up with characters and all this kind of stuff, but why? Why are certain individuals coming up with certain characters, certain stories, certain things? We're all inherently different, and there's all kinds of things that make us different. But why at that point in time? Why that person? Why that tale? And it makes me think, like, is there something in this region that is speaking to me at some place in time? It makes you sound crazy, but it really is. Like, are certain people conduits for these kinds of things? Because I've said it before, a lot of these stories with King Cryptid, I've always been interested in the paranormal and the supernatural. It's kind of what got me interested even in comic books. And then to come up with my own stories, I wrote about how The Chair was a story I felt like I wanted to write. But this is a story I feel like I have to write. Like, if I don't write these kinds of stories, if I don't tell the world these kinds of things, a part of me is going to lose it. So it's a very strange kind of aspect, and it does make me sound, I feel like I'm nuts sometimes with the compulsion to kind of tell these tales with these characters, this world, these settings, this kind of a thing. But at the same time, when I look up stuff like that, and it's happened several times now with these issues for future stories and things like that as well, it really does start making me think, like, why am I getting these ideas because of something I'm thinking of, or some kind of subconscious thought, or am I getting these ideas because I'm picking up on something that's occurring? It's so strange. It really is.
That I didn't know that's very serendipitous that you thought of the character before you found the location that you wanted. And if there's ever a place that would be perfect for Brug the swamp monster, that's it. It's HOCKOMOCK Swamp. I mean, that's about as perfect as it gets. So that's cool. And as far as like having the kind of to want to scratch the itch, and it doesn't even sound like an itch. It sounds like you get a full on body rash. You're like, I got to get this stuff out. I gotta make sure that I'm telling these stories, and that's cool because like when you say that. You've got stories for years, and just being in this kind of region, this New England area, and it's not even just New Hampshire and Massachusetts. There's weird stuff up in Maine. There's weird stuff in Connecticut.
Totally.
In Vermont. There's all sorts of stuff, and there's so much stuff to kind of material to kind of pull from and get inspired by, and find things, and when you hear those, like you said, like these kind of voices kind of telling you, kind of like nudging in this direction, is kind of like, what's causing this? Is it is it just maybe the region itself reaching out and saying like, hey, there's a well of inspiration and stories you could tell, go get to it, go at it, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, even the aspect too of just in pop culture alone, we're big fans of John Carpenter, but thinking about In the Mouth of Madness, that's Sutter Kane. He's up in New Hampshire. You put all the books together, and it outlines New Hampshire. Like, yeah, I watched that movie the first time, and I'm like, that's pretty lame. Why New Hampshire?
Live free or die.
Right? And but then when you're up here and you learn about the history more and more. It really is like, oh, they did a lot of research and they pinpointed this region for a specific kind of purpose. So it's all these different things that and it works itself into telling stories and into all these things and these legends and folklore, and it's worked itself into pop culture. We don't see as much of it nowadays because I think, and this goes back to, again, this is, I love fun conspiracy theories, and this goes back into like a fun conspiracy theory, at least in some way, of thinking that, in the 80s, in the 70s, there's a lot of stuff about satanic rituals and the occult. And then they kind of put the kibosh on that. It died down in the 80s. But then the 80s was like the extraterrestrial and paranormal and ghost explosion. So you get all these kinds of things, kind of late 70s, and I think Close Encounters kind of kicked it off a bit. And Close Encounters was even very much based in fact of different things with government intel put into the creation of this kind of thing. There's all kinds of stuff with that film that it's almost it's as close as a pop culture kind of fictional documentary about extraterrestrials touching down as there's ever been. So you kind of have this whole era kicked off with now extraterrestrials are everywhere. It's the 80s. They start off friendly, and then it turns into they're not friendly. They're aliens. They're that are going to kill you. They're going to destroy the Earth. They're the predator, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of genres with that start twisting it and turning it into something different. And then by the 90s, you have that full-on explosion of nope, the aliens are just here to wipe you out.
Yeah, we get the X-Files to thank for that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when I found out about the Bridgewater. I mean, I was kind of at the right age to kind of learn about, I was like 12 or 11 when I saw like the local newspaper put the Bridgewater Triangle story, and it's just like everything that you'd be kind of into. Oh, is this it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is the photo. Allison McGlone in the chat found it and brought up the article that contains it. Yeah, this looks like it's from 1870 to 1871. And sorry to cut you off, Pete.
No, that's cool.
But yeah, this looks like it's the photo. It's the photo from the top of Mount Washington. You can see the billowing of the snow around the peak of the mountain.
You can see that it's in a different position there.
Yeah,
it kind of looks a little.
And if you there's better photos of it too. But if you really zoom in on some of these photos, you could see it has a shape to it.
It's the Millennium Falcon taking off.
It kind of is, yeah. And you can see the way the light hits it, and it's very strange.
Yeah, wow. Oh man.
And no one can explain this. No one can explain this at all to this day.
That's and you got to think of if this was taken in the 1800s, I mean, it's not like that. They didn't even have like a, all right, hanging it from a string. You know what I mean? It's just like a pie plate. You know what I mean? Like a tin pan. That doesn't look like anything like that. Like that's crazy. I've never seen that before. Thank you, Allison, for finding that. That's awesome.
At first it just appears like, oh, well, maybe it's just kind of some blemish in the photo or whatever it might have been, but there's no concrete explanation still. And it's over 100 years, like 150 years ago.
Yeah. Oh man, that's crazy. I'd never heard of that before. That's wow. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Gets you thinking.
It sure does.
But there's a ton of stuff that just seems like we have had experience with extraterrestrials on this planet in some way, shape, or form for far longer than we even can know. We only really know, and when we're lucky if we do, maybe the past 100 years in a concrete kind of way, through our direct ancestors, grandparents, great-grandparents. Once you start getting outside of that time frame, and you start talking about 150 to 200 years, now it starts becoming, well, you've heard it from someone else who knew it. So a grandparent or a great-grandparent heard it through their grandparent or great-grandparent. Then you start going 300, 400, 500 years, and everything kind of becomes the world's longest record of telephone.
Right.
And now you're talking then like thousands of years, and it's really just you start going, I don't know if we actually truly know much about anything other than what we know today.
Right.
So and then what today is through the approved kind of avenues of what you're supposed to know.
Right.
But so it really, and to see the kind of world we live in, that's what I was kind of getting to with certain things, where I think that there's certain storytelling now that they don't necessarily want the power of this storytelling vehicle, like a film or a book or whatever it may be. They don't want people to keep talking about this kind of stuff anymore because it's getting too on the nose, and people are starting to have the ability to not just go home and have the movie or the book ruminate, and you could be just alone just thinking about these concepts, but to actually then talk with the masses and see that, wow, there's millions of people that are thinking these same things, that are asking these same questions, that are wondering these same kind of events that have occurred over human history. And then they're thinking, well, do we really want people finding this stuff out? Because what if you start finding out there's something far bigger than you in a very concrete way, and that it's bigger than those who are in power and control? So it's like I'm kind of going on a little bit of a tangent with this kind of stuff, but
Sure.
it to me it makes sense as to why there's certain things where they're covered up, they're kind of ignored, they're not taken seriously, they're ridiculed, and then when enough time has occurred, where these things are kind of accepted, and it's kind of everyone can just shrug and go, yeah, we kind of known that the whole time.
Oh, cool. Neat.
Then they go, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, that stuff we covered up like 50, 60 years ago is real.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, when you brought up the UFO thing, it was funny because just last night I was scrolling around on YouTube and it was like, Pentagon, acknowledges this UFO footage, and I'm watching like this triangle shaped thing flying around that the Navy supposedly captured, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's real," and it's just like, okay, but like for
Yeah,
60 years ago they shut down a town, and they commandeered people's homes, and they
they ruined
this is what
lives.
you
Yeah,
saw, if we write it down on this piece of paper, and you're going to keep your mouth shut, or else the men in black showed up and all this stuff, and now they're just like, oh yeah, it's real, yeah, just the Pentagon just signed off on it. Yeah, it's like, this is
yeah.
bananas. But we, like you said, we've gotten to a point where people just kind of like, oh, UFOs, oh, cool. Well, what's for dinner? It's like nobody.
Yeah.
Not a big deal anymore. Like I guarantee you, like pretty soon you're gonna find out about like Bigfoot. You know what I mean? It's just they're gonna say.
Oh
like,
yeah, they constantly talk about the missing link and evolution and all these other kinds of things. There's so many things with evolution that make me go, yeah, but
right. Yeah.
and it's still a theory, but yet, and I'm not even trying to get like necessarily religious about it in any way, shape, or form. It's more about, again, science finding the answer to these unknown questions and possibilities, and looking at it and going, yeah, but it's still a theory because it still hasn't been proven. So it's one of those things that it's still treated though as if it's 100% fact. And it's not, well, here we have either everything was created with a divine purpose, or everything was through evolution, through random chance, and then through survival of the fittest. Well, if you get this thing, I immediately look at it and I go, okay, well, if we've evolved from things, and the things that we've evolved from were no longer fit to survive, why have all the things we've evolved from, for the most part, other than the things in the middle, the humanoid kind of hominid types, why are they all extinct relatively, but everything else, like the great apes and everything else that we have, they're still running around? It's the same kind of thing with a lot of different kinds of forms of life. So evolution is like, yeah, it can explain some things, but I don't think it can necessarily do a clear cut. It's a progressive kind of chain of events that occur, because there's a tremendous leap from what we know to be like a Neanderthal to a modern human now.
Sure.
And then they keep looking for this missing link, but it's like you're gonna have to start opening your eyes to maybe other possibilities. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe they know about it already, and they just want to keep telling us it's a missing link. We just still don't know.
Right. It's hopefully we'll find out someday in my lifetime. I mean, it's kind of one of these things like you want to know, but maybe you don't. Maybe ignorance is bliss sometimes, because sometimes like you're either gonna just kind of roll with it, or it's gonna be like a earth-shattering kind of like, oh my god, like that there is something, and then you kind of wonder like, okay, well, they knew about it the whole time. What else do they know about? And it's wild. All that conspiracy stuff and the it's so much fun to think about, like what's out there, what's real, what isn't. And
Yeah, and as someone in my position of coming up with stories and characters, I have to constantly keep one foot in this world and one foot in that world to kind of come up with something that feels compelling and feels like it's substantial
and
but
relatable.
yeah.
Like you can pick it up and read it, even though it's not tangible. King Cryptid doesn't exist, but you can still read it and experience it, and it kind of feels real and relatable, and so like I can read it and I understand it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these stories, that there are a lot that are like that in terms of they're pure 100% human created stories and myths and things to explain the unexplainable. And then there's other things that touch upon a lot more grounded facts, but meanwhile we kind of dismiss them as also being part of folklore and myth and legend and just like stories people would tell around the campfire, or stories they would tell to make children not go out at night or go down a certain dangerous part. And I think that's what has also unfortunately made it so difficult to pinpoint what's fact and what's fiction, because it's all getting clumped into this big mysterious unknown thing, and then you get all these kinds of stories and people talk about this stuff, and then when there's certain things that can be proven true, I mean, like 150 or so years ago they didn't know about certain animal species that we all know today and take for granted. You go back even further in time, and what was that?
The coelacanth? Remember, like, was it the coelacanth?
There's that. Yeah, there's
like,
even the high mountain gorilla, the high mountain gorillas and all that kind of stuff. That those are only like the lowland. They would never live in that kind of it, but then they do, and then we all know that they do now.
Yeah.
And then you go back even further, and you're talking about times where they would kill people for certain things. It's and for like hundreds of years we kill them for things that we're just like, that's clearly today, like if you were to say otherwise, you're looked at like you're absolutely crazy,
right?
So it's very interesting to see throughout human history all of that kind of stuff, the established powers that be that know the truth, but they need that truth to be skewed to retain the power that they have. And then if you just kind of transpose that into, well, modern time, what are we talking about? So it's all these kinds of things that I think feed into stuff like the Bridgewater Triangle and the paranormal and all of that. Because I think the more that we know, the more that we discover, the more that we learn through actual grounded science, the more questions it makes us start asking and start trying to apply the stuff that we know to the stuff we don't know. And I think that's kind of just the way it should be. But so it's so strange, I think, nowadays to see a lot of those questions still cut off. Even the did you see the UFO hearings, with the congressional hearings that were like a week or two ago?
I kind of, I peripherally kind of was keeping an eye, kind of a little bit, not a whole lot. I didn't get in depth into it, but peripherally I was kind of trying to pay a little bit of attention to it. But yeah, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I thought the most interesting part about all of it was the amount of they wanted to talk about it in a closed session instead. And I was like, well, you just kind of admitted that, yeah.
Exactly. You admitted it without admitting it. That's, exactly right.
All these different things of like, well, can they do this? And can they basically, alter our military? And are we helpless and defenseless to it? Oh, we'll talk about it in a closed session.
Yeah, we'll check it out later.
Yeah.
Right? We'll get back to you on it.
And there's so many of those questions that were just the ones that, people would like to know about. But again, it was so skewed also in a way where I'm looking at that and I'm hearing constantly, it's all about the defense and the military and the extraterrestrial threat or potential threat, or the UFO threat of just it's unidentified. We don't know if it's from another country or not. And it's so much built around keeping people in fear. And all I could think is like, look, if they were truly extraterrestrials, or honestly, if they were here, and it was from another country, and they had these capabilities to just wipe us all out, or anybody, just completely all gone, people would have done that by now. The extraterrestrials would have done that by now. We don't stand a damn chance. So it's that kind of thing where you think about that and you go, well, they can't possibly be all that bad. So thinking if they are from outer space and they're visiting and whatever, and they have vast technology, let's say, to do something to humanity here and eliminate us or whatever it may be, or take over, they would just do it. There's no reason to like scope out the area at this point, and see what's what. They would just enslave all of us and we'd be all gone. So to me, it seems like they know about something, and it seems as if they're trying to skew people towards an avenue of fear that keeps them easily manipulated in these kinds of situations, because at the end of the day, they make a mega ton of money from that kind of, constant military spending, war, all these other things that keep people manipulated and keep the economies of the world manipulated. So, again, this is a different kind of tangent with things. But it all kind of, to me, circles back to the same kind of stuff. It all goes back to the unknown and trying to answer these questions. Because once you start answering these questions, it starts making you question everything else. And the worst thing that anyone in power the biggest thing they fear is people that are asking questions and
Yeah.
becoming more intelligible about how to ask those questions and more laser focused on what questions to ask.
You brought up you hit the nail on the head when you said like how to ask the questions. It's like you got to ask the right questions. You can't be just this broad thing. Is there is there this out there? But they're like, no, what about this on this day at this time? And then, whoa, wait a minute, back up. We need to, distract you with this, so we can kind of get our story straight, and then we'll feed you what we think you should know.
Yeah, and they want people to think that largely it's just the redneck out in the middle of wherever, and something did something to their crops or abducted them or impregnated them, something some crazy uneducated whatever, and they want you to treat it like that's all there is. Make a big deal about that, but most of these accountings and stories of what's occurred are coming from within the military, within government, high up officials. There's been presidents that have been completely silenced on the matter. It's absolutely crazy. So it's kind of interesting, again, when you're thinking about the paranormal and the unknown, and it's always in the back of our minds, I think, just because we've grown up with that kind of stuff. When you're a kid, it's almost like there's no explanation for a lot of things. Your parents are just like, it's because it's that way.
Right.
Because I said so. Exactly. So your whole life is just kind of instilled with like, it's just because we said so.
Yep.
So you start always going and falling back on these kinds of things of like, maybe it's just that way because it's that way. And but as soon as you start getting older and you look into these things and you start asking these kinds of questions, when you're still then met with like, just shut up, it's because we said so.
Right.
That's not good enough anymore.
No, because then you kind of want those answers even more. When you're a little kid, you kind of and it's almost like like the distraction thing. When people ask too many questions, it's almost like when you were a little kid, and maybe you were asking questions about like the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, did you say you wanted to get some ice cream? Oh, yeah, can we go? Oh yeah, let's go get some ice cream. Oh, okay, all those questions go away, and now you're laser focused on something else that you might want. So then, when you kind of think about it, it's like they're treating us all like we're the 2-year-old that wants Oreos for breakfast. You know what I mean? Can I have no? How about you have this over here? Oh, okay. And yeah, it's pretty. Yeah. It's pretty on
it's
point.
It's like dangling the keys. Look at the keys. Don't look at
over here. Oh, squirrel. Right. But that's exactly what it is. And so they got to keep these kind of constant, distractions and things to kind of keep us focused on other things that are far less important than the questions that they don't want to have answered. You know what I mean? It's
I think the stats were something, at least, and it's probably just a microcosm of actually the larger picture because now they're streaming an internet. But I think it was something like it was 5-1 in terms of viewership for the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, as opposed to the congressional UAP hearing, which is like. One of them is sort of like, oh, that's it's interesting, and if you're into any of what's happening, and then the other one is one of the craziest things that humankind has ever or could possibly ever know about or experience.
Yeah, for real, exactly.
But it's like the viewership is completely skewed. Yeah. So it's interesting to see that. And Allison brings up a good point, and I'll offer a counterpoint with this. Allison says the talk of UFOs and UAPs is fun, but if it were aliens, you have to get around the small problem of general and spatial relativity. And says the closest star to us that could support life is if something was looking at us from there, they would see dinosaurs, meaning that's how far away that is. But at the same time, we're thinking about that again through our physics, through what we know of physics. Through what our estimation of what physics are. It's the same thing that if you went back to 1,000 years from now and showed someone your smartphone, they would probably worship you as a god.
Right. And I always think too, it's like maybe they're not even from space. Maybe they're from another dimension. Maybe it's not even just like maybe there's a space inside of a space that. Yeah, right. I mean, I'm not talking like pot talk. I'm like, what if it's
that's the other thing, right? Is that and I've never done drugs in my life. I've never had any mind-altering substances. And that's the thing, too, is that it turns it down to that road of they've ridiculed for these kinds of reasons in multiple ways to kind of dismiss all of that, and
Exactly.
discredit any individual that seems to get a little too close.
Right. Well, it's oh yeah. And you kind of wonder too. It's like when people start asking the right questions and then they instantly clam up, and no, well, look at this. It's like you said, you're like maybe they're getting a little too close, maybe they're getting a little too warm, and they
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
cool things off. Yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing. Yeah, and I totally respect that as well. Allison says my background is in astrophysics, and that's amazing, and I
That's
totally
awesome.
respect that. I'm just saying that imagine now, in the background that you have with the knowledge you have, if we were to transpose that 1,000 years into the future of everything we know and then explore it in the furthest possible way we could possibly do that. If you're dealing with some kind of a society that maybe has 1,000,000 years on us,
Hmm.
and 1,000,000 more years of technology and advancement and understanding different physics within the universe and things that we can't even possibly know of, things that to us look like theoretical physics, that are actually very real to them. Um, who knows? So just kind of, I go with it. Again, this is a part of my creative thinking in terms of what I have to do as a storyteller. But it also makes me start thinking like, there's things that maybe we don't know. Maybe there's things that, I mean, there's certainly things we don't know. But at this point in time, it makes me start thinking the things that we take for granted as this is what's concrete and clear today. 100 years from now, they could be things that completely are discovered that blow open the door and expand upon the things we know today.
Mm.
Within our own lifetimes, there have been several discoveries that have kind of almost dismissed what's occurred before that was taken for granted as well. That's knowledge. That's
Mm.
that's concrete. So I think it's very important to still always kind of be in this whole discovery of the unknown and the possibilities therein, because there's all kinds of stuff that's occurring right now, even in the world, that I think that we just don't know about, that would probably blow our minds if we did know about them.
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you one quick question. Um, where you're in New Hampshire, uh, do you live near the White Mountains? No, no, I'm not getting
No,
specific. No, all right.
no, I probably, well, not like necessarily near, maybe like an hour away.
Okay. Have you been up there? Have you like
Oh yeah.
yeah? My wife and I went up there in North Conway for our kind of like an anniversary kind of getaway a couple of summers ago, and that place was super cool. Because I know King Cryptid takes place up in the White Mountains,
Yep.
and that's where he's hanging out. Um, but when you've been up there, and I'm sure you have a few times, was that one of the things that like? y- Do you feel like?
Honestly, that's my first time visiting New Hampshire, because Erin had always visited. She's a Massachusetts native. I was born on Long Island, born in Brooklyn. Then we moved out to Long Island, and then I left Long Island when I was like 20, 25, maybe 25, 26. I think maybe 25. But so then we went to Massachusetts. We lived there for a while, but we always wanted to get to New Hampshire. As I was when we were dating very early on, one of the first vacations that we had took was just a couple of days in New Hampshire. I had never been in the area before that, never been to the White Mountains, nothing. And literally, I was like, "We have to move up here. We have to move up here." And she's like, "That's so funny you say that. I've always wanted to move up to New
Yeah.
Hampshire, but specifically kind of around the mountains." It was kind of like a weird spiritual experience for me to just even be around the mountains and see the mountains. But being in the area at this point now, we've been here for about 6 years or so, and we visit whenever we can. But that was my first experience, was going up and seeing the White Mountains and being in that area and everything. And man, it's tough to explain unless you feel that kind of connection. I know a lot of people have felt that kind of connection to different areas, whether it's the water, the beach, or whether it's the mountains, or just land and expansiveness in itself.
Mm.
There's something very different about that than the overabundance, I guess, of humanity and structure and architecture from suburbia and cities and that kind of a thing. But have you felt any of that when you go up in that area?
Absolutely. It's such a like pristine and like I don't want to say like it sounds corny to say glorious, but it's like it's my wife and I went up there and we stayed in North Conway, and like just in that vicinity, there's a whole bunch of different spots that you can check out. Like there's the Old Man on the Mountain. There's we went to this place, Diana's Baths, and we like I'll tell you a very quick funny story. We were on, we wanted to go there. It's like it's natural spring that's in that region, and people go there to kind of like soak you know soak it up, and it's just like it's really nice. It's this natural spring waterfall. It's really pretty
Hmm.
there. And so I'm looking it up on my phone, and it says, oh, it says it's a 10-minute walk from where we are. Let's just hoof it. Like why drive anywhere? Let's just walk. But me being a schmuck, I didn't notice that it was like it's not like 17 you know something lane or something road. It was just like you go up here, take a left, and you're there. There's just a little red dot. So like, okay, let's hoof it. Let's walk. So we go and we find the red dot, and we're in the middle of nowhere. We're just like sitting there and just on a road, in a country road, and we're like, where the hell is Diana's Baths? Where are we? So we just keep walking. We're walking and we're walking. And then we find this like a sign that says like Diana's Baths, and it was pointing back like the direction we were going. And so like we were almost on an episode of like Dateline NBC if we were like getting that, if we are continuing that path, because the tensions were getting, like with like somebody, the spouse murders the other one, and it's just like it was getting pretty
Yeah,
tenuous.
yeah. Oh
And
man.
it was I'll never forget this one point in time too. Like we're walking around and we see this sign. We're like, oh, we must be getting close. And then we go over like the hill, and as we're heading down, we seen a sign that says Bear Crossing. And I'm like, what do we take? Like the Timothy Treadwell detour? Like, are we gonna get eaten by a
Goodness.
bear now all of a sudden? Like, what the hell? And we ended up making it, and then we get to Diana's Baths, and it's another mile. It's another half a mile walk in the woods. And it was like we're still not done walking, and we got there, and we were barely even talking to each other. It was horrific. But that you're talking about the wonders of the White Mountains in New Hampshire. Like thank God the rest of the trip went well, because that Diana's Baths trip could not have gone worse. So just be careful when you folks out there, if you're trusting your GPS for walking location, make sure you have like a street address. It's something that just says like a number, a street, and
Yeah.
you're good to go. Because if it just sends you on a road, boy, you could be in for a rough trip. But I gotta
I
say,
noticed that up here a lot. GPSs are very strange up here. I really don't know. I don't know if it's just having to do with the GPS itself, or the
right.
metaphysical properties of the stone, the granite, whatever it may be.
Exactly. You never know. I mean, I'm just.
Because we'll be on highways and it's like signal's lost. It's gone now. Okay, that's great.
Jeez, thanks, Granite. If we're ever back up there, which I hope to head back up there soon. I mean, I don't know with everything that's going on, but we hope to make it back up there soon. I would love to go. We had a blast when we were up there, and
Oh yeah, it's beautiful up
it
here.
really is. And when you said that, once you made it up there, and you saw just the sights and the atmosphere, and so you're like, you know what, I'd like to stay up here. I want to
Yeah, it's and
plant
especially
roots.
coming from New York. When I used to do the trip back and forth for about maybe 2 years before I had moved up to Massachusetts, there would be a distinct feeling of energy shift
Mm,
from leaving even just Massachusetts and going to New York.
mm,
The energy hitting New York, especially once you cross the bridge, once you cross the Whitestone Bridge into like Queens, and it's just it's a very different energy. It feels very suffocating all of a sudden. It feels
yeah.
very dark.
Mm,
And then likewise, the energy shift from Massachusetts to New Hampshire, especially North Conway, the White Mountain region, this just a very big sense of like lightness,
mm,
and just this kind of, you feel small in a good way.
yeah.
You feel like a part of the world more. then, and even though you're not necessarily a part of humanity more in an area like that, you feel like you're more a part of the world. Like it feels like there's more balance to it. And I don't know how else to explain it. Again, it sounds very metaphysical. It sounds very kind of trippy.
Mhm.
But there's no other way that I could really explain it. There's such a difference in the feel of the energy.
Mhm.
It's not as claustrophobic feeling as it could be in like a city or in another kind of an area. To get up here in this kind of an area, and even just the part that we're in New Hampshire in itself right now, it's not. We're an hour or so away from the White Mountains, so it's not anything that's like that. But it's also not very urban over here. It's kind
Yeah.
of a very sparse suburbia where we are. But there's such a difference from where we were living before. We just were like we can't ever move from this area. We just love geographically this
Yeah.
area. We're just drawn to it.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, when I was up there, and you know, I had very much the same feeling that you did about when you had said being like feeling small in a good way. That's how you feel like when I was up there looking at like the White Mountains, and they had the railroad going through there. It's just like it's like you take a deep breath of fresh air, and you it's sparse, and it feels very expansive, and and kind of it feels nice. And so we're like knowing that you're basing your comic and your character and his base of operations is there. That's kind of like I know that you had mentioned in one of your streams that you'd seen the comment that I made about like when you're up in North Conway and King Cryptid's looking out, watching over the place. It next time I go up there, that's the first thing I'll probably think of is King Cryptid up in the mountains, and and solitude, and
Yeah, it becomes
it's a
kind of
cool atmosphere to
yeah. It's like going up
ground
to
it.
the North Pole. You can't help but imagine if you went up to the North Pole that there's Santa Claus lurking around.
Right. And the elf
You
say,
just
one of
even
the
though
elves
you
say, "What
see
the hell are you doing here?"
nothingness, you still can't help but think like, well, maybe we all of a sudden are walking and we just hit something. It's an invisible force field that leads to Santa Claus's house. It's you just can't help it. The imagination runs wild,
Mhm.
and it didn't hit me until you had said that. That I'm like, it's funny because when I was a kid, and anytime I took a trip into like New York City, I'd kind of have that in my mind of like, oh man, Spider-Man would be swinging through the buildings and that kind of a thing,
Sure.
and all that kind of cool stuff, and it gets
Yeah.
the imagination going. And I think that's something I don't know whether it's because of the area, the setting, whatever it may be. Superheroes are so predominantly in the city.
Mhm.
um it's just kind of interesting that when you had said that, I never thought about it like that before, that it's like someone could be reading this book, someone like yourself, and
Mhm.
you'd get familiar with this character and the settings. And then especially if you're within the area, there's a lot of I mentioned like the Spalding Turnpike, I mentioned Lincoln, New Hampshire, I mentioned Ossipee, I mentioned all these different places. And it's kind of similar to that respect of these kinds of stories that we've read in comics growing up, that when they set them in a parallel kind of world to ours, it's not a Gotham City, it's not a metropolis, it's our own kind of place, but it's not. But here's this whole kind of universe that's taking place among the mountains, among New England. But then I think people are, and I guess I'll spoil it a little bit, but King Cryptid does not hail necessarily from New England. He had a journey. He had a journey upward to eventually establish himself in New England, where he felt, and I guess in a way that it's the same way I felt. He felt at peace in this area.
Mhm.
So I'm going to get to that over the course of, because it's not a linear story. It's not like it starts with the origin and then we linearly build out. It starts now, present day. King Cryptid hasn't really been cited for decades, and now he's being pulled into this war between the supernatural world and the mortal world. As more and more things are coming to light, as we're knowing about more and more kinds of different things among the paranormal and the unknown, people are talking. They're kind of creating almost like this energy among the conversation. Like we're bringing these things in a way, kind of not necessarily to life, but we're acknowledging them, and it's kind of emboldening those creatures, but also it's kind of forcing the other side of it, which is the dark magic, black budget science of the government, to kind of start really going even harder to lay down the kibosh on these things from kind of having the lid pop off because they don't want people to discover the like 5 different layers to what exists. It's not as simple as they don't want them to know about, genetic experimentation or whatever else. There's so much more to the story I'm setting up that we're not going to really know about in terms of the readers anyway. It's so painful for me because I would love to just tell everyone the whole damn thing.
Sure. Right.
So,
I can tell. It's like you kind of because you know it and you kind of want to.
Yeah, and I'm like, I gotta wait like 8 years to get through this story.
Right.
Come on,
Yeah. It'll
but
be worth the wait. It'll be
yeah,
worth the wait.
so it's all these different layers in the story and the characters and everything else. But at the same time, while that's the overarching story, every issue is self-contained and it's a fun story, every single story. So it's that kind of a thing where I'm hoping people are there for the ride. They enjoy the ride. It's fun. But also, there's going to be things set up with the themes, not only of a metaphysical, philosophical sense with a lot of the stuff that occurs, but also in terms of the different characters, what they go through, the settings, the world building, the action and adventure that occurs within the story too. Because it's everything that I loved about comics and storytelling when I was a kid, and I feel like so much of that is kind of gone. It's still so very based in what we know of right now. It's not asking deeper questions and setting up these premises and kind of going with it. It feels like, we're kind of regurgitating the same thing over and over again in mainstream comics. They're just kind of taking a bucket of paint and just going like, okay, new character. But it's like, wait, that was that old character. But no, it's the new one now. We changed something about it. Whether that's, the race, the sexuality, the costume, whatever it may be. It's a new character now.
Yeah.
And it's just not. It doesn't feel that way. And I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy King Cryptid because of these kind of characters and settings and creatures. Even though they're so not us, they're still kind of us. And there's a lot to see ourselves in personality sense. In the deeper sense of self, as opposed to surface level, superficial nonsense, which honestly doesn't really matter, because even characters that people look at today and they go, oh yeah, that character, I relate to it. It looks like me.
Right.
Give it 30 years, you won't look like this character.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Right. I'm particularly interested in what you do in issue 4. That's when you of King Cryptid. That's I can't wait for this, this series and what you're going to do with it and how that's going to develop over the years, even like when you're saying that, like I've got this set up for years and years and years. It's like, I want to tell this story for the rest of my life. I'm like, just when you have that kind of like, ambition and say that drive to say like, hey, not only I don't have just like this layout and like a beginning and a middle and an end and then that's it. Maybe you do, but you've got like this giant journey. It's not just a destination; it's just a journey that you want to tell. And I mean, it's just it's that's exciting. And as a reader, it makes me excited to want to see where it goes and see what happens next, and knowing that it's not just going to be like, oh, it's a 12-issue thing. I got it set up for 12 issues, and then that's it. I'm going to be doing this for as long as I want to.
Yeah. And that's what excites me about it too, to be honest. I mean, and I couldn't have done this in any other point in my career. And some people think like, oh, well, is that sad that like you couldn't have done this kind of a book before? I honestly don't think I would have known how to done this kind of book. I think I would have stumbled through it and been very unsure. And then also, like I said before, I've always loved the paranormal, but I never had this kind of strong sense of where to go with this stuff until I moved up here. So that's why it's another thing of I'm just thinking, and I've been in the Bridgewater Triangle. I did a bunch of library classes at all of these kinds of towns.
Really?
Yeah. So I was when I was living because we lived in Peabody and then we lived in Gloucester, and Gloucester's all kinds of. We lived across the street from a place that was so creepy. Constantly, 3 a.m, it's this big observatory looking weird building with like a glass dome on the top of it, and where we lived we could see them, and I don't know if they could see us. I hope they couldn't.
I hope you couldn't.
But they probably could. And we have weird hours. We're creative people, so we're up at like 2, 3, 4 in the morning.
Right.
Even still. So we'd see like these weird, like you'd see candles and multiple people robed walking in a circle around 3 a.m. several
Whoa.
times throughout the year. Every time there was the equinoxes or anything like that, anytime there was some kind of like earth, like pagan kind of holiday, that kind of a thing, you would definitely see it. But then what was even creepier, you would see, and I don't even know if I feel comfortable saying it live, but you would see very weird things come out of the place, things that didn't seem on the up and up. And
Really?
it was so strange. We wanted to get the hell out of there as soon as we could, because we're like, if we could see them, they could probably see us, and we shouldn't be looking.
Yeah, you're like, Aaron, where's your ESP now? What didn't you tell us about this place? This place is
Right.
No, we gotta go.
It's like across the way, and no one, you couldn't see it. I think only us and a couple other buildings that were facing that side could see it, but we had such a good dead-on view
Yeah.
of and it was the creepiest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I was like, there's something really weird going on at that place. It makes you think like you're in Burbs,
Yeah.
you know,
With-
and
yeah.
it's just kind of looking out there. And it's like, is it? We're not cutting the grass, but it's like one of those things where is it cutting too many lawns?
Right.
You know, it makes you think you're crazy. But we would see it constantly, all the time, and it was so very, very strange. But I still don't know to this day what that place is. I've tried looking it up. I've tried Google mapping it.
Really?
We couldn't really get a sense of what the hell is there based off of the address. All we could ever do is see what we saw, and it made no sense ever. It was up like a really big hill, and there was tons of trees in the area, but you couldn't see it from the bottom. You had to be where we were to see where they were and what they were doing. Very, very strange.
That's creepy. That's yikes. Because
Yeah.
you kind of wonder, like for example, like in where I'm around, like the Freetown State Forest, there would be people that would come out of the woods like dressed in like robes, and like you could tell that there were people that had sighted others coming out of the forest wearing robes and regalia that indicated that they were doing some sort of ceremony out in the woods. And most people would probably just think that's just a bunch of kooks, you know what I mean? And but then obviously you start hearing other stories about some of the shenanigans that were going on out there, and you kind of think twice, maybe, like, were they up to no good, and like what were they really up to, and do you really want to know what they were,
and it's not to say that all that kind of stuff is bad, and these people could have been doing just very normal in the sense of not bad or evil,
right?
But it's one of those things, if your mind does go to that, because there is so much stuff that's synonymous with that kind of thing. But yeah, it was very strange stuff that I would see come out of that area the day after they would do one of those ceremonies, and I just, like I said, I don't really feel even comfortable actually going into detail on that. But I just want to say hey to the chat for a second. Hey, Eric, what's up? We got Blue Teddy here also, says, just in a general sense, I get what you mean about different places having a different energy about them. Gonna have to go back to Pittsburgh. Have to go back to the Pittsburgh area soon, and I'm dreading it. Bad vibes. Yeah, that's how I feel anytime I have to go back to New York. I'm like, oh, do I really have to? I'm like, I guess I do because my family's there, but
can't they come here?
Why can't they move?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But let's see. GJ says, good afternoon. Did I miss creepy and interesting topics? I'll have to catch the replay and see what you guys spoke about. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. We talked about the Bridgewater area. We talked about various, the Freetown Forest. We talked about all kinds of other stuff as well. Let's see. And GJ wants to know more about Vamp. I don't know if you heard about... I mentioned this yesterday when I had Clint on the show. We were talking about vampires. He's working on his Dracula book. But I mentioned Vamp yesterday. Vamp is going to be in King Cryptid. And he writes it like that because it stands for Virally Augmented Military Police. So these police, these military police, it's like a secret society level of military. They're basically injected with a virus that turns them into vampires. and it augments their powers, their physical abilities, all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't give them the downside of a vampire. They could still go out in daylight and all that kind of stuff. But it does give them the only way that they can maintain that sustenance and that level is to feed on blood. And it can't be blood that you get from the blood bank or anything like that. It can't be even blood from a human being. It has to be the blood of cryptids. So that's going to be built into King Cryptid stories later on. When we were talking about vampires yesterday, I was like, there's going to be vampires in a sense in King Cryptid, and I had mentioned that. But yeah, that's one of those things where, again, I hate that it's like this is. I might mention it a little bit next year in an issue, but it's going to be more about maybe 2024, 2025 when I actually go full more into that.
Yeah.
But so I wish I didn't. Can people just give me maybe $100,000 and I can spoil the whole damn thing for you guys right now? Maybe I should do that. If the campaign raises like 150,000, I spoil the entire series for everyone, and I just don't stop talking about it. I make a bunch of videos, and then we'll do the comics later when we get to them.
Right.
I just need to get these stories out, and you guys can hear because Erin's heard them like 50,000 times already.
She's like, oh yeah, and then what happens? Okay, yeah.
Right?
I think I've heard this before.
Oh, okay, good. And then they
What's
get a
the next
virus
series
that
you're
makes
gonna be
them
working on?
Okay,
After King
right.
Cryptid?
Okay, Pete. I'll be like, what next series? This is it. This is it, baby. This is it. Our whole life. This is what you signed up for. She's like, I didn't sign up for any of this. You started doing this like 2 years ago.
Oh, that's funny.
But there's so many of these kinds of stories with so many different layers to it. It's one of those things like we have Necro. I've talked about them before, and it kind of works out that the initials turn into New England Cryptid Research Organization, and that stands for Necro. What does that mean? I don't know. It's kind of the same way that World Health Organization is WHO. They could have named it anything they wanted. Why did they name it so it sounds like WHO when you read the letters? It makes me think that when I see these kinds of or Cobra for healthcare.
Right.
You could have named it anything. Why did you name it that? So that the letters, you got to see that the letters when they're all together look like something that it's going to make people kind of go, huh? Is the same thing with Necro, that it's like, oh, well, I guess those are just the way the words came out. And then that's what they stand with the N and the E and the C and the R and the O. But there's a lot more to it than that. And then as soon as we get that to be eventually revealed as to what the hell is actually going on, it turns into a really weird level of where we do a deep dive further eventually into the huge history of what's occurring. So it's a very deep, hidden, secret society. It's layers and layers and centuries upon centuries old. So it's one of these things that we sprinkle that throughout the course of the King Cryptid series with different various things that occur, but it's never really like the forefront because it's not a plot-driven series. It's a character-driven series. So all the characters are motivated by what is occurring within their lives, and that's what fuels the plot. So it's fun for me figuring all of that out, but at the same time, so much of it, as I'm just writing down story ideas or whatever it is, I'm writing down full ideas for issues. It's not just like, oh, that sounds like a cool name, or oh, maybe I'll put a werewolf in a story. Yeah. It'll be like a whole full-fledged story. I've never had this kind of experience with storytelling or creating anything in my life. That's what makes me really think. It's like there's something at this moment in time, and I'm feeling like some kind of a conduit for something. And it's so strange to say that, and I know how strange that sounds, but I just hope that at the end of it, everyone just has fun with the stories, because it does feel like that there's a purpose to these stories, and it's not just to entertain people, maybe get people thinking about things, maybe get this thing into a more talked about kind of accepted way of approaching certain subjects, get people thinking about creatures and cryptids and the possibilities therein, whatever it may be. I don't know. I have no idea. All I know is I have stories to tell. I have characters that need to get out there, and this is the best way to do it, and I think hopefully the most fun way to do it.
Well, it's funny because where this is your first kind of new series, and what was it? It's been over 10 years since the
Yeah.
chair. So,
Yeah.
like when you were saying that, like you haven't had this experience before. I mean, you have, and then you haven't, not to this depth, apparently. You know what I mean? It's just like all these ideas came flooding in, and they're continuously flooding in, and you got all these ideas, and it's got to be a great feeling to have this kind of creative surge, and you're like, hey, I got these stories I want to tell, and I'm just itching to do it. And I, not only do I want to
It's
do this, I
nothing.
want.
Yeah, nothing like ever that I've experienced before.
Yeah.
It's seriously, it's crazy. It's overwhelming a lot of the time.
It sounds it. It sounds
Yeah,
like, man, like I've got all these, like, like when you say, like, I've write like full page things, and it's not just like I'm gonna dump a werewolf in this one. I'm just gonna put, like, this kind of, this kind of creature in there. No, there's going to be a whole backstory behind it. There's going to be all of this, and this ties into that, and that ties into this, and it's just like, I don't know.
yeah.
It sounds really cool, and I'm excited to go, to come along for the ride and see where it goes and see what happens.
Yeah,
It's
I
exciting.
can't wait, man. Yeah, I seriously, I can't wait. I think it's going to be so much fun seeing the artists come up with these stories, because the way I kind of put all the scripts together, they get the scenes, they get the story, but they don't get like the minutia. They don't get like the dialogue, and I'm not telling them how to create the panels or the story. I'm trusting them to use their artistic vision, which is what they're kind of brought on board for, is because I'm like, I like the way you visually tell a story. Just here's my story, I'll tell it to you, and then tell it visually. And I think that's honestly how you get some of the best comics ever made. As soon as you start having the writer stepping on the toes too much of the artist, and vice versa, all of a sudden it just becomes this weird, this weird mess of everybody kind of playing ego. And there's certain moments definitely that I'm like, okay, make sure that we focus on this character, or lay out this page so it's like a splash page. We want to make an impact. So storytelling wise, I'll tell them certain things that when I want to make a certain moment stand out. But other than that, it's they run with it, and they've been doing amazing with it. Very impressive stuff.
And what I'm kind of looking forward to too is kind of like the different feel between issues with the different artists, because obviously we know what Christian Rossi can do, and we've seen some of the samples of like what he does and what he could do with King Cryptid. But then you've got like Alexander Jovic, and his style is completely different, and it's, I'm kind of like, I see that, I think it's issue 3 that he's going to be on. I'm like, I'm looking forward to that, because I'm a big Mr. Crypt fan. I mean, Mr. Crypt is huge in our house, and I'm very excited for him to be on Unit 44 too. That's really cool that he's going to be moving on to that.
Yeah,
series.
he's such a good storyteller.
Yeah,
and so expressive with his art.
But part of it is like, I know that it's going to have a different feel from one. Like, what I like too about how you having different artists be on different books, it kind of gives it like an anthology feel. Like it's all kind of continuous, but it's also like single story things set in the same universe, and it's like each one's going to have its own different feel. From my gathering, I mean, you would know more so than I, but yeah, that's one of the other things that looks really cool. So when Alexander Jovic, and I saw his name on the project, and I saw that at least like the cover of issue 3, and how cool that looks with like the kids, like, hey, and then King Cryptid's silhouette behind them in the woods. I'm like, so it's like, I'm excited to see what that story's about, and I think I'm going to be in for a different feel from maybe the previous issues and what's coming after that.
Yeah, and especially there's going to be stories in the future where we do have maybe like a 2 or a 3 or a 4-parter. I probably won't go into a 4-parter, but 3 parts. So usually it's pretty good to tell a story like that. But it'll be the same artist when it's something like that, and it'll be specified. Like and I mentioned it before, to be like Killer King will be the first 3-part story arc that we have. It'll be like part 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3, and that'll be issues 10 to 12. And Kira Covington will be on that story arc. But other than that, it's mixing it up. Every single issue will be different artists. We'll bring back artists to tell certain issues. There's a couple more issues I want to do with Nick and Alex, as well as with Christian. So they'll be back in the future for different issues and things like that. But yeah, they will have different feels in certain ways, but they'll still feel like they're all within the same universe. But
Right.
that's what's so important to me about getting the right artists for the job. So it's one of those things that even though storytelling wise, I'm getting the stories and it feels like, okay, here's the stories, I can write them out. As someone who loves and wants to make comic books the rest of my life as well, finding the right artist is just as fun for me. To be like, okay, I've got these stories. Who would be a really great artist for that? Like, there's going to be a story that explains what happened to the profile of the old man of the mountain. I'm going to have Frankie B. Washington on that story. It features a dragon. It features King Cryptid growing to like 10 times the size on the night of a super blood moon. All these kinds of things.
Who better to do kaijus than Frankie B?
Exactly.
You know,
and
the kaiju king.
Exactly. So I have that story there, and I'm like, that's Frankie's. When Frankie is available to do it, he's doing it. So he's going to be doing that on next year's batch. But there's all these kinds of stories that are like that, and finding the right artist to make these stories sing is so important because it's comics. It's a visual medium.
It's like finding the right instrument for a piece of music that you're writing. You know what I mean? Does this call for an oboe or a trumpet? You know what I mean? Both sound different, but both are musical instruments. So it's just like you're composing the music, and you want to make it sound right. And in this instance, it's you want to make the comic feel right based on what the story is, and finding the right artist to kind of complement the story.
Yeah. Yeah, and Allison asks, can I do a crossover with King Cryptid? That's the thing, is that in true Cryptid fashion, if anyone wants to create their own kind of King Cryptid drawings, art, stories, whatever it may be, and you want to put them out there, go ahead and put them out there. He's not necessarily like public domain, but I feel like in certain respects he is. And then when there's people out there, they go, well, if you do that, and all of a sudden, let's say their King Cryptid becomes super popular, their art of it, and they sell all these prints, or they sell this original art, or whatever it may be, I'll be like, well, I'll just ask them to do an issue.
Right. Right. Yeah, there you go.
So it's like, oh, good, you've proven yourself. Let's have you on an issue, And obviously, if they're spending this much time with the character, they're a fan of the character. So it'd be great to get people to kind of do stuff like that. But I think that's how you get all these kinds of things really growing. And not by being precious about them and constantly putting the kibosh on every single person who wants to do their interpretation or make a fan art or sell something or whatever it may be, but by actually nurturing it and letting it go out in the world and be like, no, let's let it grow. And people will hopefully read the issues that I'm creating because they're like, oh, I want to read these. I want to check out what's coming straight from the source. But I don't have the time to micromanage the whole damn world on how they interpret or create about anything that has to do with King Cryptid. I got a million King Cryptid stories to make.
Right.
So it's like, I'll let everybody else. If you want to have fun with them, have fun with them.
I mean, that would seem like a cool, like, it came out on a Wednesday story. Like if somebody came up with their own 3-page King Cryptid story that they wrote and illustrated, or had somebody illustrate and then submit it, and obviously it'd have to go through you, but but that's even fun, that it's like you're making it fanfic accessible, whereas like something like Star Wars, like the mouse is putting the kibosh. Oh, you have a cool story you want to tell? Nope. Star Trek? Nope. No, but King Cryptid, you got a cool story you want to, or a cool artwork or something that you want to share, go right ahead. That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah. I seriously, I want it to be as I don't know, not necessarily, I don't want to say like fan friendly, but I want it to feel that accessibility towards it. And instead of, we see so much of that with this like IP driven world where everyone is very like, oh well, if they take it, then they're gonna make a movie and they're gonna make millions, and the likelihood that they could do that though is so unbelievably small.
No one's gonna take King Cryptid and then publish their own thing and then try, like, what I mean, that's copyrights are all about, but I mean, like, look at what was the 50 Shades of Grey lady that she made what was it off of I think it was like Twilight fanfic, and it was all the wacky stuff, and then she just like made it her own, and she did pretty good for herself, So yeah, I mean, I guess there's a little bit of room to kind of finagle some stuff. But yeah, like that I think that's kind of cool. Maybe I'll do a Puckwudgie story.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
yeah.
just me. I like
I got
saying the
my
word
own
Puckwudgie.
Puckwudgie story too.
I'll have to wait
Yeah.
till to see what your Puckwudgie stories are, how your Puckwudgies are compared to to what
They're
I got.
gonna
But
be minions of Brugg.
yes, I remember you had mentioned that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what because one of the legends, and kind of to bring it a little bit back to Bridgewater Triangle HOCKOMOCK stuff, but one of the legends around Puckwudgies is that some people feel that they're controlled by like this other dark entity, like that tells them what to do, and that they're not just like these kind of like free spirits that just kind of they're mischievous and they play horrible tricks on people, but they're actually something else behind them that are making them do that. That they're actually kind of like you said, like little minions or foot soldiers for something else. So, yeah, that fits into what your ideas of what a Puckwudgie is going to do in your story.
Yeah, kind of taking a lot of these things and being inspired to kind of either twist them, make them your own sort of version or whatever it may be, or stay true to it. And in certain ways, I'll be doing both. But it's that kind of thing where I'm looking forward to creating as many of my own kinds of characters as possible. To give like a wink and a nod to a lot of the folklore and myths and legends and established cryptids. And then there's also going to be cases where established cryptids show up. There's a whole, and I can't get into it at this point because it's a big plot point to the Killer King story arc. But there's a whole explanation for a lot of this kind of stuff with established cryptids that we know of, a lot of the folklore, and all these different things that we know of today, and where they all stem from. But I'm going to touch upon that in like 3 years from now, so it's torture for me.
I can see the look on your face. It's like, I want to talk about it so bad, but I can't.
I really do.
Yeah, but that's good because you're excited about it. That's it's all good because for us, and I'm sure I can speak for everybody in the chat that's still hanging around, that we're all excited about this. We're excited because we see your excitement in it, and we see that how amped up and ready you are to tell these stories. And so if you're excited about it, we know that you actually care about it. You're not just kind of cranking out stuff just to get it out. You actually are you can tell the passion about it, and like when you get like, this is going to lead into that, and I want to talk about it, but it's not for another 3 years down the road. Like 3 years, so yeah, this is an expansive thing, and I like I said, I'm pretty sure I can speak for everybody in the chat saying that, or anybody watching this, like we're excited about this. We can't wait to see where this goes.
Thank you guys, really appreciate that. Oh look, even Donnie Cates is excited.
I'm sure he is.
Well, we'll talk in a few years, Donnie.
Oh, that is hilarious.
Blue Teddy Narration says, yeah, very excited to see this come to life. I really appreciate that. Thank you, guys. It really means a lot. So we're going to wrap up this show right now. I want to just cap it off by thanking you guys so much for actually bringing us to 2 milestones today. We crossed 20,000 on the campaign, and we crossed 400 backers as well.
Awesome.
So thank you guys so much. This is phenomenal. This is like the 8th or 9th day of the campaign, and the 400 backer mark has declassified and unlocked the Beware of King Cryptid flyer that Necro has produced here, the New England Cryptid Research Organization. So you will be receiving one of the flyers that they put up in the area because they're a cryptid research organization, but they're not very fond of cryptids. So they don't view King Cryptid as a hero. They don't view King Cryptid as something that should be looked at as a good thing. He's dangerous. He's a beast. He's something that people should look out for. Of course, there's much more deadly and dangerous things out there, but they, for some reason, are really hung up on King Cryptid. So you guys get that flyer. Every physical perk backer gets that. On top of, if you backed on day one, you get that 11 by 17 folded poster that Christian Rossi did. You get that pre-launch bonus if you signed up on the pre-launch and backed as well, and you're a physical perk backer. You get that Kier Covington poster too, and then you also get the trading card, the King Cryptid trading card from Alterna series. It's number 8 in the series. We have a couple other things to unlock here. So we have the $25,000 backer bonus, which is everybody will receive one random King Cryptid trading card from the series, which I have to, maybe I'll show that right now. And then we have the backer bonus unlocked at 500 backers, which is Nick Hunter's poster. You guys would get that as well. And then the other ones are there as well. You guys can check those out. But yeah, the trading cards arrived the other day, and they are phenomenal. I love them. They just look terrific.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, they came out great.
Wow.
Oh, I couldn't believe it. They got these to me in record time.
Wow.
And so on what it is that this is the 8 card set. So this is the cover. They're all going to be the covers. The whole series of trading cards is going to be the covers. This is the first series. We'll have the second series for next year, and so on and so forth. But they'll come in these packs. So you can see the packs. And then on the back, it'll tell you what's what. There's going to be 25 cards that I've signed, and there's going to be 10 sketch cards from 10 different artists. And they're going to be randomly inserted in the packs. And then the packs, I'm going to have a live stream one day where I put all the packs together, mix them around, show you guys, yes, I don't know what is in these packs at this point anymore whatsoever, and then everybody starts getting a pack. So there could be people out there that have ordered maybe 10 or 12 packs. Maybe you get all 10 sketch cards. I have no idea. There could be someone that gets 1 pack and gets a sketch card. But the way that these cards are laid out, so this has the front cover to issue 1. And then on the back of it is just talking about the issue, what occurs, first appearances of characters, who was involved in creating the issue. Just very normal kind of stuff about the issue. Now, there's a flip cover that's a back cover to each issue as well. So on the back cover, issue 1 is my art. And on the back of this card is actually a report from the New England Cryptid Research Organization. And it reads like a very trivialized accounting of what occurs in issue 1. So for instance, it reads, at approximately 1 a.m., a government vehicle traveling north on the Spalding Turnpike was overturned near Ossipee, New Hampshire. Both occupants were injured. They cited 2 large creatures of unknown origin as having been responsible for the incident. An animal tracker by the name of Victor Lugo was brought in to seek the whereabouts of these 2 creatures, having identified them as a large humanoid moth hybrid known as the Behemoth and another humanoid known as King Cryptid. This marks the first sighting of King Cryptid in over 3 decades. Several days into his search, Lugo was found seriously wounded and in need of immediate medical attention. He claimed to have been attacked by both the Behemoth and King Cryptid. Currently, the whereabouts of both creatures are unknown.
Oh,
so that's just
awesome.
A little bit of extra fun. And then there's some things, too, because some of the issues, Necro will recount things based on witnesses reporting things to them. So they'll get reports and calls and all these other things about what has occurred during the course of this issue. So, for instance, in issue 2, there's no one that knows what happens that it goes on here because it takes place primarily in the cave of King Cryptid. But in the Necro report, there's going to be reports of witnesses citing that they heard loud, explosive, thunderous noises coming from the White Mountains. There's going to be reports of seeing this large white wolf on the side of the road. All these different things that occur within the issue. So it kind of offers a little extra level and layer of fun to those issues as well. But so it's a lot of fun creating this whole thing and making the cards and everything else, and
those
I
cards
really appreciate it.
They look great, and like how they tie into the actual issue. That's incredible. It gives you a little extra tidbit. It's just like a little extra. It's like a little extra salt and pepper on the meat of the issue. That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah. I love trading cards. It helped me to get into comics a lot too. Growing up, and your parents don't really want to give you a lot of money for comics, and we just didn't have a lot of money, period. But it's like, here's $1 for a pack of cards, or $1, and you really can't even get a comic with it, even at that point in time.
Yeah.
So it was like, all right. Sometimes I'd save up and I would get the issues, but then one time I got a pack of cards, and then I started learning about all the characters and the comics and all the different things that occur. And then I start going, oh, I gotta read about this character. So I start picking up different kinds of issues of these characters that I learned about in the trading cards. So that was a lot of fun, and I just kind of want to again bring that kind of fun back, not just for the adult readers that read Alterna, but if they have kids, like you have kids that are loving
Yes.
these cards,
Absolutely.
you know, and hopefully that gets them excited about reading and all these kinds of stories as well.
I can tell you firsthand those cards are a huge hit because my son's into, he's into like cards in general. He collects Pokemon cards and stuff like that. So when you know when I back the alternate campaigns and you get the trading cards, you know, I told you a story just recently. Last week, the box came in. I had to pick
Oh
it up.
yeah,
Oh, this is great. My
that was great.
I had to pick it up at the post office. It ended up on the wrong truck, so I got a notification: your package is ready to be picked up. So I pack up the kids. We go to pick up the package, and my son, who's 7, he's carrying the box out. He's like, "Daddy, who's this for?" I'm like, "Well, why don't you read the label?" And he sees alternate comics. He's like, "Oh, these comic books?" I'm like, "Yep." He goes, "Oh my god!" So he starts jumping up and down in the middle of the parking lot of the post office. And can we go? Like, all right, let's just get in the car. Get in the car. So we drive home. It's only a 2-minute drive. So the first thing we do is when we get in the house, I open up the box and he opens up. Now again, I don't. Some of the comics are for all readers, and some of them aren't. So I have to tuck the Blood Realms and the Can't Kill Cades, and I have to tuck that stuff away. But he can have Mighty Mascots and Mr. Crypt, and that stuff he can have. And so I open the box, and he takes a peek inside. And he reaches in and he pulls out the pack of cards. And he's like, "Wow!" Like you would have thought that you found $1 million in there. He sees this and he's like, "Look!" And there was the foil red koi card, and he says,
Yeah, this one, right? Yeah.
"That one. That's it. That's it." And he saw that and he says, "Oh, Daddy, look! Like there's a foil card in there. It's a shiny card. This must be an ultra super rare card." He says, and he got so excited. And then we have the Alterna Comics card binder. So he goes upstairs, grabs his card binder, brings them downstairs, and he's starting to like put them in the sleeves. And he's like, "Should I put the shiny one over here?" I'm like, "You do whatever you want, pal. Those are your cards. They're yours to do with what you like." So they again, when you say that they're for readers young and old to be into these cards, I can tell you that readers young and old can appreciate them, and they do have that classic
That's
kind
great.
of like comic card feel, because I know the ones you're talking about. I used to have them too.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you'd get you get by the pack, and you'd find out more about the characters, what the first appearance was, what their power sets were, which was kind of cool. And I like that aspect of it too. So you can kind of find out all the characters, and he's pointing out like the Chiron Morville card. He's like, "Daddy, who's this one?" I'm like, "Oh, maybe when you're a little bit older, you can read that one." But yeah, he was all about the Legends of the log card, and the Mr. Crypt
That's
card.
great.
He was, "Oh, Daddy, look, Mr. Crypt!" And he got all excited because I don't tell him about any of this stuff. When he opens up that box, it's a surprise. So he was, he was over the moon. He was
That's so great.
talking about that for days. So
Oh
yeah,
man. Wow. Yeah, that's so awesome. When you told me that story, I was telling it to Erin and she was like, "Oh, that's so awesome. That's so cute." And I was like, it's something about it. You get these cards, these things, especially if you're familiar with any of the characters at all, which he's familiar with some of them, obviously, and then you just kind of learn more about them, and it kind of starts you thinking about the stories in a different way when you read them, and then all of a sudden you start thinking about, well, what if this character met that character? And even if we never do something like that, the idea that the fans, whether young or old, they can actually get their own imagination going with if these characters were to meet, and maybe even if they're lucky enough and they're able to commission an artist to draw something together with the two characters or whatever it may be. It's all part of the fun, and I love that aspect of it. So I'm so glad that he loved the foil card. He's probably going to really love that Chiron Morville looking foil card too.
yeah. I mean, he was all about Oh boy. Oh man. I can't wait to get my hands on that one. That's all these and the King Cryptic cards look great too. All the cards that you've been sending out have been pretty high quality. They're good stuff. It's not just, you can tell that it's, it's worth it to invest and try and collect them, because if they were just kind of flimsy cardstock that you could just you can tell if it's just like coming out of an inkjet printer on some cardstock, and it's just like, sitting there with like a pair of scissors cutting them out, and there you go, folks. You can tell that they're legit. They're good quality. They have the same feel as the ones that you and I remember as kids. So that's pretty cool. And you know what? The other thing too is about the power stats are. I never thought about this before just now, but like if you ever had like one of those who would win in a fight arguments with somebody, you're like, who would win in a fight between Officer Moore and Mr. Crypt? Now, let's just flip the card and see what the power sets are.
Yeah, I love those conversations too. I've seen a lot of readers having those conversations in the chat, and especially when the cards go around and people start getting them. Even the creators have these conversations too about it, and
I'm sure they all think that their guy would win.
And they're like, why does Mr. Crypt have like a level 9 endurance? I'm like, well, he can't get hurt or die, and he never tires.
Yeah, he's constantly running from every issue. He's running from somebody or something.
He's this supernatural thing. He's unexplainable. And it's one of those things of like, even though he couldn't do any damage really to anybody,
right?
He pretty much couldn't be damaged. So he could be displaced or put somewhere else, or put into like a time portal or relocated or whatever it may be, but he can never really be killed, and he doesn't even know how he came back to life. So it's like the creators think about these things on that level of and have fun with it too. So it's great to see.
Vampires.
Yeah,
he's 2-0 against vampires.
So he's a force to be reckoned with.
He sure is. His power set should be like through the roof. He's a force to be reckoned with, that Mr. Crypt.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the Timey Tim. He's got his own card, and he's got unbelievable stats with certain things, but then he's like a 1 with other things, and it's like, well, he doesn't need to fight. He doesn't need to necessarily have strength. He's got crazy levels of speed. He's got crazy levels of intelligence. He could just move wherever he wants to move instantaneously. He doesn't need to fight back. He doesn't need to know how to overpower somebody, because you can't ever touch him. You can't destroy him. So why does he need to fight back?
I remember when I saw the stats for Timey Tim, and I thought like one of them was like kind of low, and I thought it should have been higher. If I remember correctly, it was some sort of comment I made in the chat. It was somewhere, and it was like, well, if he's Timey Tim, like, wouldn't he have limited time to do what he needed to do? So if he only has 5 minutes to do something, then that's it. Then he's just got the 5 minutes. So maybe his endurance might not be is because he's only got the 5 minutes to complete the task. Like, I don't know. Like, I got a little kind of,
well, that's what's great.
About that.
That's what's awesome about it, though, is having people think about these things, and are we right? Are we wrong? How would you interpret it? I love that too. That's what makes all this stuff so much fun. It's so great. But anyway, thank you so much, Pete, for joining me today, man. It was a great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
I recommend you guys, if you missed the beginning half of the conversation, we talked a lot about the paranormal events in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. We talked a lot about different things outside of just in the New England area as well. And then we went on to talk more about King Cryptid, and it's been great spending some time with you, Pete, and everybody else in the chat too. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And Pete, any closing comments before we part?
No, I don't. Not really. Just beware the Bridgewater Triangle and the HOCKOMOCK Swamp if you ever manage to travel out here. Thanks for having me on. Thanks to everybody in the chat for tuning in. And if you ever want to talk more Bridgewater Triangle, more HOCKOMOCK, give me a ring. I'm your Huckleberry. I'm your man.
All right, man. I appreciate that. Have a great one, everybody. And Pete, have a great one too, buddy.
Thanks a lot. You too. Take care.
Take care.
All right. Bye.